So good evening, everybody. My name is Rachel Tubridy. I'm Managing Director of PeopleSource, a finance recruitment firm. For those of you who've been here before, I think this is our eighth sponsored event with young professionals. Each and every one of them seem to get better and better every month. So we're delighted to be the sponsors. People are often asking me what's the market like at the moment, so I'll just touch on that for a second. The market has been super buoyant for 2021, certainly compared to 2020. So for candidates, if you're looking for a job, that's great. You've got potential opportunities there. If you're a client looking to hire into your team, you might have to work that little bit harder at selling that opportunity to potential candidates. And also, if you're a client looking after your team, you might have to work that little bit harder at retaining your staff members as well. So wrap your arms around your staff members. But if you have any questions, what I'm going to do is put my details in the chat box below, and you can contact me if you have any questions. So without further ado, I am going to hand you over to your fabulous committee member, Peter Gillen. Peter, over to you to introduce the evening. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Rachel, and hello everyone. Welcome again to this Young Professionals May event on RPA and AI in the workplace. My name is Peter Gillen, as Rachel said, and I'm a member of the Young Professionals Committee, and we're delighted to host you this evening. Our theme for our events this year is Stepping into a New Ireland, and this is fairly reflective of the shift we've seen over the past number of years in the way how we work day to day. So even before remote working became more mainstream in more recent times, the use of emerging technologies such as RPA and AI have been at the forefront of that shift in how we work. With us today are two experts in this area who will help us explore what these technologies are and, more importantly, how we can use them in our day-to-day jobs. So the first of our speakers is Ciarán Porter, a manager in PwC's data analytics and assurance team. Ciarán has extensive knowledge of RPA technology, having led many teams in the development of its use for audit, advisory, and operational purposes. Our second speaker is Kevin Quinlan, a data scientist in ESB, which is Ireland's largest utility company. Kevin has delivered diverse artificial intelligence and analytics solutions to support multiple businesses, from energy trading to HR operations to the rollout of 2.4 million smart meters across Ireland, the latter of which was awarded Best Use of RPA and Robotics at the 2019 AI Ireland Awards. But hopefully we hear more about that later. So it's safe to say we're in very, very capable hands this evening. One thing we're noting before we begin is that we're very conscious that these topics include some terms that not everyone is as familiar with, such as RPA and AI. So we'll endeavor to explain these as we go. So sit back, I guess, and enjoy the evening. Please be sure to interact with us during the event. We do have a Q&A button, so feel free to log your questions throughout the evening, and we'll pose them to Ciarán and Kevin later on in our Q&A session. But without further ado, over to you, Ciarán, when you're ready.
Yeah, that's great, Peter. Thanks very much for the intro. It's great to be invited here to speak to you today on RPA. And just to give you essentially a high-level overview of the topic, and I suppose where we're at now in 2021 in terms of RPA. So first of all, RPA, what is it? So it stands for Robotic Process Automation, is the actual definition that you might have heard. So in today's session, this is kind of a high-level agenda. So I'll go through what the concept is and is not, who are the key vendors, when should you decide to automate or not to automate. I'll go through some best practices in the area, and I'll give you a high-level example of automation in action. As Peter mentioned, I'm manager within the data analytics and assurance group in PwC. And this is very much an area we've been looking to build and grow on in the last couple of years, and worked with clients in that space. So first of all, what is robotic process automation? Well, I'll tell you what it isn't. So it isn't a humanoid robot. So it's not like your C-3PO or R2-D2 for any Star Wars fans out there. Apologies now, I think my video might have just dropped off. I'm thinking back now. So yeah, something that can easily replace humans. That's not it either. I'll get into that a bit more later on. Mechanical tooling, physical robots, so they're not like factories or those kind of machines, and it's not purely just a cost item as well. So what it actually is, so RPA is simply put is software. So it works in the back end of your systems. So thinking of it like digital labor. And the whole objective of it is to replace manual time-consuming tasks. So think about those areas where you might have to do something. And I'd say particularly in the accounting and finance profession, you typically have your month-end processes, or you may have daily processes where you're using different systems, you're manipulating data, and it's the same repeated process again and again. This is where the I suppose, power of RPA and this area can come in. So it's non-invasive to your existing system. So, it's kind of like a layer on top of everything you already have in place in your organization. So it kind of can help bring all those together and automate processes in that way. So there's no need to change underlying technology you may have. Transparency, auditability, and I guess key there is the digital workforce. So it's not that the robots are taking over or anything like that. It's very much complementary. And the idea is it takes people away from the mundane and repetitive tasks and can help with the whole team experience thing within your employment. And I think even more so now, and it can be difficult to connect and just engage in work when you might be stuck at home. And this can be a really powerful tool in that respect. So one thing, just I suppose in terms of the timeline, so where robotic process automation sits, so in the middle of there, kind of mainstream adaptation of it has, I suppose, been in the last sort of 5 or 6 years. That's kind of come from previously where we had a lot of offshore. So you might have sort of lower level tasks that you outsource, typically maybe to Eastern Europe or Asia or something like that. RPA can essentially take on these kind of tasks in an automated way, and it's kind of brought inshore, if you like, or onshore. And then what's kind of fast emerging now as well is this concept of intelligent process automation, which I'm not really going to go into too much today, but it's kind of where there's more of a cognitive and intelligent role, and the bots, if you like, can learn tasks and trends. So you're not simply telling it to do step 1, 2, 3. There's a bit more, I suppose, intelligence and manipulation, and it can do. So that's very much the future, and it's still like an emerging area. RPA, as Peter mentioned, like it's very much the now, and a lot of organizations are starting to see the benefits as there comes a more mature offering. And in terms of, and I guess one of the reasons why it's becoming so mature is just the breadth of vendors that are available. So there's just a few on screen here. Some of them you may have heard of. So UiPath, Automation Anywhere, and Blue Prism. UiPath was actually founded in Romania, I think in 2003 or 4. And recently that actually IPO'd on the New York Stock Exchange. So, but again, there's those three are certainly the big ones in terms of vendors, but there's lots of other smaller ones, and fundamentally they kind of solve the same issues within an organization. Here's just a few high-level overview of the vendor comparisons. The good thing with these tools is you don't have to be if you want to build a bot, you don't have to be a programmer or writing software code or anything like that. They're very user friendly, these tools. It's very much a drag and drop kind of platform. So and I'll talk process, understanding your process is important, but if you know your process, you'll know how you can automate that process. So it's very much designed to be user friendly in that way. And I just kind of highlight there's on the fourth row in that table, automation attended and unattended. The idea with that is there are some bots you can run in the background, so you can set it up and it runs overnight and it does your task. Others may require some human intervention, like giving it inputs or whatever. So they will be classified as attended bots. So just to differentiate between the two. So deciding to automate, I guess why or how, I suppose, do organizations choose candidates? So these are a few examples. So obviously not everything is, suitable for an automation type task, but these are sort of the key areas that might make it a good candidate. So high volume or repetitive. So is it the same task again and again? High impact. Are you taking away a lot of costs that might be with your organization to save time or spend? Quality is important. So good data is important. So garbage in, garbage out, and the old adage. Low expectations. I guess what that means is just, or exceptions, I should say. So it's after 6 now. So, so exceptions handling. What I just mean by that is, there's kind of you don't have an expectation of things going wrong or random things. Like it's fairly, robust, and you kind of have an expectation of what the outcomes are going to be. Swivel chair, they just talk about there, is where you're using something across different systems. So for example, you might be pulling stuff out of an email, dropping it into Excel, and then pushing it up into like to SAP or an ERP system. So in that process flow, you're integrating with different applications. So RPA is basically, you can combine all those together as one process. Stable environment, defined workflow, highly rules-based. I'd certainly say the rules-based is important there. That you can map out literally step by step what the process is, and you're telling the bot, this is what I want to do. So you do need to be specific when you're designing and building these, and that's where understanding the process is key. So like you can throw these tools at things, but ultimately, certainly the process, and the quality of the data as well, like that's really critical to making these a success. So then in terms of where it can be used, it's any function really in your organization, and certainly probably on the left side, a lot of you guys here would be interested in this space. So, any elements of your accounting, your GL, your fixed assets, your AP, your AR, etc. But likewise, if it's more in an operational space, if it's in a HR space, like pretty much anything where you're interacting between different systems, you have a defined process, and you can literally map out steps 1, 2, 3. You can build a bot that, once you have these tools, you can build a bot that it might be something there that might takes you an hour to do as a mere mortal. Although we're all very bright people on this call, no doubt. But if you can set up a bot, it's something that can be done in seconds, and that's where it allows us to focus then on the soft skills and the more value add tasks in your organization. So yeah, I've been hitting on about process a lot, but I just really want to emphasize this because it's not just all about technology. But if you want to automate something in general, you have to know what the business process is. It has to be clearly defined. And if it's a broken process, automation won't fix that. So, it's only as good as the process that's there currently. So I'd really emphasize that. You want to think about the goals. So why are you using it? Is it time saving? Is it cost? Is it reducing error? Just really thinking about that. Then, as I said, mapping out the steps, and it really has to be really granular. Like, open your email, click into this, click this button, and press this keyboard shortcut. It's really nitty gritty stuff like that you have to map out. then for anyone who's familiar with software or design, build and test is like the typical mantra. So again, you want to build it up, design it out, build it up and test it, and then get comfortable that it can operate effectively. And then where the value is, where it can be done on a scheduled basis. So as I mentioned, you might have something that runs nightly or every hour or whatever, but it's not someone in your team isn't going in and physically bashing through the work themselves. It's set up and it just runs in the background, and so that's kind of the objective where you want to go. In terms of best practices, there's a few slides here I'll briefly run through. User credentials, so obviously like there's kind of security and privacy aspects to this. So wherever there's kind of personal or confidential data, like the bots shouldn't really be accessing that. Sending emails as well is another one. And then like it's very much up to the organization, but the best practice is, where you're interacting with third parties, or it could be clients if you're in professional services, just first talk with them anyway, but I would imagine that they wouldn't necessarily be comfortable with that. So it's very much focused on like your internal operational process is where the power is, and we've all seen with security how important that's been the last few weeks or so. Opportunity assessment, so you want to think about how complex is the task, how many screens, what applications are you using, is there much variation, is the process you're running in January going to be different to how it looks in February? So it's just thinking about that, and the simple ones are the ones that are most effective. My earphone falls out. Looking about the tasks that could be automated then, so if it's highly repetitive, high volume, standard inputs, low exceptions and rules, so it's very much it's a standard thing, and it's very, if you can explain it easily to an individual, then it shouldn't be as difficult. It should be straightforward enough to explain to a bot. So it's just looking at where it's standardized and repetitive, and that kind of thing. So then benefits you want, as I kind of mentioned in the previous slide, so you're talking about time savings and bottlenecks in your process. So is it taking a lot of time that you could cut out? Compliance is one, flexibility, quality. And so obviously if a person is doing a task, there's always a risk, if they're copying and pasting a report in Excel, or they miss a step or something like that, you kind of cut out that risk of human error that can come up, and ultimately productivity. So you're taking away these tasks, an automated process, and it frees up your team to do other things. So that's always a good bonus. Last slide, last couple of slides here, just in terms of automation in action. So just a few examples, or one example that I'll show through. I guess where this fits in is part of the whole like digital transformation sort of that organizations are looking at. So for RPA, it can be very much linked to other sort of digital areas, and two key ones I highlight here are transformation of data, and you might have heard the term data wrangling, just how you process data and visualizing it. So within all of these, these can very much work in tandem. You have a piece of data set, you need to do a bit of work to get some insights and cleanse it and transform it. You might use RPA then to do processing of tasks and just do your kind of rudimentary tasks, and then present it in a visual format using the tool. So there's a few example vendors in here as well, but I kind of mentioned the RPA ones on the left side. The example in here, one sec, is in the healthcare industry that we had. So this example was just around a firm, an organization that produced a lot of patient reports, patient claims in PDF format. So anyone who's worked with PDF, like, it's quite difficult to manipulate and pull stuff out and the format can change different reports. So we were able to kind of identify what the formats of the healthcare reports were, and build an automated process to support this organization. So previously, people time was spent literally having a PDF and copying and pasting into an Excel document, key patient information around invoicing and procedures and so on. So that's not very exciting, and also risk just in terms of human error. And typically, if people have a lot of tasks to do in a day and it's very repetitive, I find that sometimes there's a case, I want to get this done and get out at 5 to go. Well, it was the pub, but maybe it's a 5K walk now, I don't know. But that people time can be just reduced, or the risk, I suppose, can be eliminated or significantly reduced anyway, moving it to an automated process. So yeah, essentially previously PDF files, they pulled it out into Excel manually and then just did some analysis there around their patients. What we've kind of supported this organization with is, I guess, the icons here. So this is meant to represent the bot. So just our bot that we've built helps just pull this stuff out into Excel, and it has like the control checks and validations built in. Then we can push that into a database ourselves, and that the client has access to, and then perform some visuals out that. So it's where, as I kind of 2 slides previously, linking the 3 areas and how it can be used. And this example was in healthcare. I kind of mentioned there, like it's in any industry, whether anywhere where there's a standard process you can map out. So that's kind of a whistle-stop tour, if you like, at this point. I think Peter will probably do questions maybe afterwards, and I'll hand over to you.
Absolutely. No, first of all, thanks very much for that, Ciarán. Really interesting stuff, and definitely helps, I think, to give a view of an overview of, I guess, what not only what RPA is, but also, I guess, what key considerations to bear in mind when actually implementing it. So amazing. No, thanks a million for that. Just a gentle reminder, I suppose, for everyone watching that feel free to submit questions using the Q&A functionality, both for Ciarán here and also for Kevin, who's up next. So don't forget that. But we'll have a Q&A session after Kevin's finished. But yeah, thanks a million again, Ciarán. But if okay, over to you, Kevin.
Thanks so much for it. I'm just share my screen now. So my name is Kevin Quinlan, and I'll just give a brief introduction to artificial intelligence and kind of what we've been doing in ESB around AI and RPA. So now this will hopefully be a nice high level. I'll just talk about in general what AI is and kind of what we need to perform AI experiments, and then a nice little use case we have ongoing at the moment. So first, a little about me. So there. So I went to UCC, where I did business information systems. I started in ESB in 2015 out of college. Since my undergrad was kind of mostly general computers and business degree, for my first 4 years in ESB, I did part-time college in National College of Ireland, where I did a HDIP and a postgrad diploma in data analytics to kind of get me to become a data scientist, the sexiest job of the 21st century. Fact. So I've been working as a data scientist now for the last 5 years or so, but still proudest moment for me was I was once mascot for the Ireland team. That is literally on my CV, and it's never coming off. So ESB, for anyone who doesn't know, is the largest utility in Ireland. It's vertically integrated utility. So that means basically we're involved in the power generation, the distribution, the supply, and also energy trading, and also have kind of consultancy wings, do startup funds and smart services like electric vehicles and such. So we're tied to the founding of the Irish state. So we're founded in 1927 with the construction of the Audit Crusher Dam, which at the time gave us, I think, 80% of the electricity for the country. Now it's only 2%. So it shows the kind of massive growth we've had over the past almost 100 years. And so we're a very traditional company, but also very innovative. So like through the 60s, we would have built done things like rural electrification and building of Turlock, which is like a massive hydro station in Wicklow Mountains. It kind of looks like, you ever seen it like a bond layer? There's just a tunnel that goes deep into mountain. And well, then key as well to getting Ireland's reduction in carbon emissions and delivering new smart services. So again, like electric vehicles and things like Nest and Climb Out at Home. So the biggest project we have probably at the moment, and most famous one, is the Green Atlantic and Money Point. So that was announced a couple of weeks ago. So this is basically the construction of the biggest offshore wind farm in the Atlantic, I believe. And it's enough to power 1.6 million homes when it's completed. So it'll be part of the decommissioning of our coal plant in Money Point. So that's kind of bottom right here. So we'll be decommissioning that and replacing it with a massive green energy hub for things like hydrogen generation, storage, and also a synchronous compensator, the biggest synchronous compensator in the world. So that's basically, it just adds resilience to the network and prevents faults, which is important, especially when there's renewables. So the fact it's a large offshore wind farm, it's going to be very important. Then hydrogen is obviously the new kind of green fuel that everyone is getting into, and it looks like that could be a big player in the, especially in the electric vehicles market, because it's just very easy to store. So that's ESB. So now AI. So heard a lot there about RPA, which was very good. So as a very much a simplification, RPA replicates human actions, while AI replicates human intelligence. So whether this is making forecasts, making decisions based on an image, or kind of getting understanding from a document, it's all about replicating this kind of human activity. So what is AI? At its oversimplification, it is a program which allows a computer to think and to learn. So that sounds very sci-fi, so I'll explain a bit more what I mean in a bit about this, but generally they're programs, they're coded in languages such as R or Python, mainly Python. But there are many different kind of types of AI then. So here's kind of an overview of the different branches of AI. So machine learning, which is kind of the more predictive analytics and forecasting. Speech, which is kind of like your Alexa and a lot of kind of chatbots as well, and we say automated translations. Natural language processing, the bottom left, so a lot of this kind of taking things from classifying documents and kind of summarizing documents. So it's used a lot of kind of, we say, the legal profession and doing a lot of the work where paralegals would have done before. Expert systems, so that's replicating work that a human expert would do. So we say detecting lung cancer based on a scan. Planning and optimization, which is sort of like optimizing routes for deliveries. And then robotics, so again, kind of RPA, but also kind of automated machines. But the part I'll probably focus on a bit more in this presentation is the computer vision. I just think it's probably the most interesting, has gives the best examples, and it's kind of the basis of the main use case I'll be talking about. So how does AI learn? Basically, it learns the same way that kids would learn, by repetition. So if you were trying to teach a child what a dog is, you wouldn't say, oh, a dog has 4 legs, it has a tail, has a long nose, although sometimes it can have a kind of squashed up nose. So you wouldn't say that. You'd be out for a walk and you might point out a dog to a child and go, oh, look, there's a dog, there's another dog. And then a child might go, oh, there's a dog. And you go, no, actually, that's a cat. So the child will learn from that. So it can learn based on over and over again, seeing dogs in the real world and be able to differentiate between a dog and a cat, and even be able to identify a cartoon as a dog. So that's how AI learns. You feed it a lot of labeled data. It tries to classify it randomly kind of at first, and then it makes mistakes, but then iterates through it again. So it learns from each of these mistakes. So take a look at this in action. Hopefully this all works out live demo. So I've built a model here that can identify between cats and dogs. So we have loads of photos here of dogs, but 300 photos of dogs, 300 photos of cats. And as you can see, all very different. So some of them have 2 dogs in the photo, some of them have people in the photo as well. All different angles, all different shapes and sizes of dogs. And then similar enough as well for cats. Again, all different types of cats, all different kinds of poses. So I don't go in and tell the model that, oh, this is a cat because, or this is a dog because. I literally just feed it the images. It goes through the model that I built, and then we can give a quick test. So I open this up and we say give a picture of a beagle. So that's a very dog-looking dog, and it gives back the prediction here that of 99.9% confident that it's a dog. So we can do this again with a cat. So give a Siamese cat. It's a very cat-looking cat again. Again, 99.9% confident. I can try and trick it a little bit by giving something a bit different. So maybe a Sphinx cat. And again, very confident that it's a cat. We can go further and try and trick it. So say give a cartoon, Santa's Little Helper. Again, very confident that it's a dog. Bit further down, but still thinks. I would go even further and really try and confuse it with, I don't know if anyone's remember Cat Dog, the cartoon. So thinks is a dog. So that ends whenever debate was ever had about that show, and yeah, he thinks it's a dog. But again, that's how AI learns. It goes by repetition. You feed it loads of data, and it learns through classifying over and over again, picking up the little nuances and in the photos that it'll be too long for us to even try and describe. So most AI, so not every part of AI will use this kind of process, but this is kind of a general AI process that's used across most of the things. So mostly they're built on neural nets. So neural networks are based on the neurons, which are kind of firing constantly in our brain. So when you hear the term deep learning, that basically means that there's multiple layers of neurons. So at the moment, this has just 3 layers. Deep learning could go down 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's the general type of model that we would use. What we also need is a lot of input and a very specific output. So as you saw there for the cat dog, loads of images, 300 images of cats and dogs that we put in, and then a very specific output. So we just said, is it a cat? Is it a dog? So very, very, very narrow. So when you hear the term like generalized AI, which, think of like Westworld or the Terminator, they're able to do everything. That's very hard to crack because at the moment, AI only works when you have a kind of very specific outcome. Another thing we need is power. So you need very powerful computers. At the moment, we do most of our kind of modeling in the cloud. So we have access to very powerful machines. GPUs, which power video game graphics, are the kind of chips that are used to run neural nets. And then what goes on inside the neural nets is a black box. We don't actually know. So this is one of the big issues with AI, which we'll look at a bit later. But I put up the photo of the cat dog. If I go in, I can't check, why did the computer make that decision that it's a dog? Like I can't tell if it's because of the color, because of the nose, whatever. I can't go in and see the reasoning behind that. So have a look where AI has been implemented. So Netflix has a great documentary in AlphaGo, which defeated the world Go champion, which is like chess, but much more complex. So again, they'll use AI to develop all the different strategies for the game. So self-driving cars, that's going to use a lot of AI, and it's going to use a lot of different types of AI. So computer vision, forecasting, machine learning, all of it's going to be involved in that. And AI has even written a new installment of the Harry Potter series called Harry Potter and the Portrait of What Looked Like a Large Pile of Ash. So now this is a couple of years old, so the language processing has come on a little bit since then. But if you find snippets of it to read, it's actually very funny because it reads like a normal sentence, but it's just not right. But you do see AI coming into the arts a bit more and more. And for the week that's in, we actually had the inaugural AI Eurovision last year, which was won by Australia. So again, this showed the power of AI working with humans, because almost all the songs were actually finished off by humans where they put it together. They just had a lot of the music created by AI, and the song that actually finished last had the least amount of human interaction. So we're looking at an actual industry use case now. So I'll go through the AI model that we made for the smart meter rollout in Ireland. So this is a computer vision project where we built a model to audit the installation of the meters. So we'll have a look now. So ESB are installing close to 3 million of these smart meters across the country. This will allow kind of users to get like real-time usage on their meters and to avail of loads of different smart services. So this is a massive task, and we need to ensure that all the meters were installed safely and securely. So we could have someone go out and manually inspect each of these meters, or have all look through thousands of photos of meters, but we wouldn't be that crew. So instead, we developed a process by which an installer take a number of photos on their phone during installation, and that would be fed back into an AI model that would audit the installations. Anything that was considered as done incorrect or incomplete by the AI would be sent to the human auditors for inspection. So instead of thousands of images going through, the auditor at the end will just have to kind of only the ones which need review. So how we did it was, again, similar to the cat dog thing, where we said we needed loads of data. So for the first step, we needed to identify if it's an old or new meter, we say. So we fed it through hundreds of photos of old meters, hundreds of photos of new meters, put it into a model, sorry. And then when we feed in a new meter image, we can get back a result. So this post installation, which is what we call this type of photo, it's given back a 99.9% probability that it's post installed, which is correct. So there we go one step further. So we might take the final reading of the old meters. So we can see here we have to use a thing called object detection to identify where on the photo that the reading is. We find it, get the red box around it, take that out, identify the different numbers on it, and then again it gives back a prediction for what it thinks the numbers are. We follow that on then again, we keep going, we identify different safety checks to make sure that all the installation has been done correctly and the installer has finished off the installation correctly. So we identify if the meter seals have been included, that the warning tag for the meter cover has been there, the warning tag for what is called the cutout, and the warning tag for the isolator as well. And then if the sticker has been signed and affixed to the meter. So instead of having someone go through all these images, we're able to do it. We get a model to do it for us. So it's very cost effective. It's very cost effective and quick to install these millions of meters that we're doing. The resources, the amount of resources and time we save from not having a dedicated team there is massive. And the actual team, the people who are there who need to go through these images afterwards are only looking at the ones which need review. Then we're able to ensure safe and correct installation of the meters. And then during COVID times, we didn't have to send out auditors to go investigate the houses. That these could all be done remotely. And then also we've used this as a lighthouse. So lighthouse project where we can show that this technology works, go out to the rest of the business, and maybe drum up some more interest and new use cases. And that's what we've done. And there's some other kind of interesting things going on at the moment that we're investigating. So we have things like we're using drones to fly over overhead lines and seeing which trees need to be cut, so to prevent outages. We're looking at the use of chatbots throughout the business. And then things like automated and predictive maintenance. So across, we say, our plants, trying to predict when the certain machines would be likely to fail, so we can go and inspect them before it happens. Now, we can't speak about AI, unfortunately, without talking about ethics. So ethics is such a big part and become a massive aspect of the industry, where you see like ethical officers start being employed in every company. So, but first thing we talk about is poorly defined rewards. So a lot of you have done economics, and you can see what the danger is of unintended consequences in society. So the same thing can happen easily in AI. So this is a game called Coast Runner, where the player drives a speedboat around the circuit. So just a quick video, hopefully it opens. So a player drives a motorboat around the circuit, and the goal is to win the race. This was coded that the boat would try to get as many points as possible. So you can get points by winning the race, but you can also get points by picking up these turbos, which obviously make you go faster. So the idea was that the AI would play the game, try and get as much points as possible to win the race, try and get all the turbos at the same time. But the AI discovered had a better way of playing the game. It discovered that this is a loop that just kept circulating here, not care about winning the race. It could just keep getting the turbos that reappear. So it's just got into this loop, and this is unintended consequence, obviously, of a poorly defined reward system. Roomba, I don't know if anyone has one. I have one, and they're absolutely fantastic. And a lot of data scientists love them as well. So there's this group of scientists who tried to reprogram theirs to be as efficient as possible. So they built a reward system for the Roomba that would get points for every piece of dirt that it found. So they turned it on in the lab, and they went off to lunch looking forward to seeing how clean it would be when they returned. When they got back, the place was destroyed. There was tables knocked over, plants were knocked over, and it was only at the end when they reviewed the tape, they understood what happened. So it started out fine. Roomba went about cleaning the lab, but then bumped into a plant, and that caused a leaf to fall. So it went, ooh, some points. The Roomba got some points by picking up the leaf. So what did the Roomba do? It started banging into everything it could to create a massive mess so they get more stuff to clean up. Unintended consequences. Inherent bias is another big thing. So this occurs everywhere. So you may have heard of Amazon scrapping their AI tool that was scanning their CVs because they're found to be biased against women. Now they're taking out all the references to gender and the name from the CV. So what happened? The AI actually learned from certain phrases and even schools to determine their gender. So for example, if someone in Ireland was saying that they played camogie, and since the AI was based on their own staff, which had been primarily white males, and you're building a system to hire people like the successful people you already have, you might start seeing how that becomes a bit of a loop. Facial recognition is also a major area where there's a lot of bias. You may have seen a movie on Netflix called Coded Bias, which looks into this a bit further. Basically, they found that a lot of the facial recognition software out there was made in Silicon Valley by companies, again, whose general staff was young white males, and they performed very well on young white male faces, but quite badly on people with darker colored skin, with older people, and for women. So again, something you always have to be worried about when you're making AI is this bias that can be part of it. Responsibility and decision making. So this focuses on who's responsible for decisions an AI takes. A few years ago, a group of Dutch students built an AI machine to buy random things off the dark web. Now, it didn't tell it to buy anything in particular, just gave it some money and set it off to go buy things. So it bought some normal things like a speaker in the shape of a Fanta can, but it also bought things like drugs and weapons. Everything they got, they put up in a gallery by their college to showcase what was there. Eventually, the police came in and took everything. But they did it to show the issues around responsibility and accountability for AI. So who is responsible for decisions that the AI made? The developers didn't tell it to buy weapons, but the AI did so anyway. And this is very much a thing in driverless cars. So if there's a crash, and if there's going to be a crash and it's inevitable between two cars, then what does the car do? Does it try to protect itself and the people in the car? Does it try to minimize the casualties between the two cars? If there are 3 adults in one car and 1 adult and 2 children in the other, does that come into its thinking? These are very important, sensitive issues that need to be addressed. And going back to the black box of the AI, if this does happen and whatever decision that the car made, it's very important that you can see why that decision was made. So there's a lot that needs to be regulated here. Finally, feedback loops and cycles. So again, if people are going for loans and they've previously been rejected for loans or their bad credit score, we'll say, if they go back into a system where AI is rejected them automatically for loans, they don't get a chance to improve their score. Then they go back and get really bad interest rates, which makes them more likely to default, and the credit score gets worse. Or police predicting crimes where they're committed and sending police to those areas. If they do that based on previous data, they might send them to disadvantaged neighborhoods. The more police that go to these neighborhoods, the more crime they'll catch. It becomes a feedback loop. The AI keeps sending them back there. The good news is the EU has recently released the first legal framework in the world for AI, And that will come, so there'll become a time when, like GDPR, there'll be AI regulations in place. Now, where will AI affect accounting? So a lot is going to be done in kind of receipt and document tagging, automated entry detection. So there's a really good quick video I'll show on that. So using computer vision to be able to count the amount of stock in a warehouse. So you could set up a camera that's constantly is just counting the stock. And finally, automation, anomaly detection. So an AI that can go through the reports and pinpoint straight away if there is abnormal expense in there. So now the big question is, will AI take our jobs? What will the future be like? Well, it'll take some jobs and change others. So there's a thing called Morvack's paradox, where what machines are good at, humans are weak, and vice versa. So what are humans good at, and what are machines good at? So we'll see a lot of interaction between AI and humans. So it'll basically, AI will turn into a tool that humans will use, and it won't necessarily be something that will get rid of every job. It will get rid of the mundane jobs, but not everything. The ones which will stay are the ones which need creativity. So creativity will remain in our realm. If you look at the Eurovision AI competition, it still needed human interaction to perfect the song. Empathy will be a big one. So again, like the loan situation, AI can be used as a good indicator tool or buffer, but empathy will always be required, especially where humans will be affected. And finally, critical thinking. So in the smart meter example, all the AI does is filter out the ones it's very sure about. The ones that require a bit more nuance, so something where that the auditor can check and say, oh, it's hidden in the shadow, or there's a reason why the installer did this. That critical thinking will still remain in every unit. So thank you. Take any questions that you have.
Amazing. Thanks very much for that, Kevin. Love the cat and dog example. Really helped to explain, I guess, how AI learns. I'm probably most impressed by our appearance as mascot for the boys in green, but that's for another day, I think. But yeah, I'm conscious of people's time, and we have a lot of burning questions submitted already, so I might just dive right into that if that's okay. So I'm gonna ask Ciarán if you're free to rejoin as well. That's okay. Perfect. Yeah. So just to kind of, I guess, get things kicked off, one question for yourself, Ciarán, that's come in is regarding RPA, and you gave us a few examples of some scenarios where RPA is best used. So, like, repetitive tasks, for example. Are there examples of when when it's not appropriate, when it just shouldn't be used at all?
Yeah, like there's probably, I suppose, probably just two key areas there where, so obviously one is complex tasks. So, where it isn't kind of standardized, and it might change over time. There isn't real stability in what you're going to do. There's too many balls to juggle as such. So where it's not really something that you can standardize over a long period of time. And then I suppose the other piece, and Kevin kind of mentioned it as well, where it will always require some element of human judgment. So ultimately, like, say, if it's an audit, or if it's a doctor making a life changing decision, or medical or healthcare, that kind of thing, like, there's always going to be some element of human intervention. So I think it's very much, it's not meant to replace, it's meant to support what you can do already, and it then frees you up to focus on where there's human thinking, critical thinking, and the relationships and soft skills and all those kind of things. So I'd probably say they're the two of the key areas.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. Perfect. Thanks very much for that. Another question while I have you, one RPA question in from Shar. What metrics are typically used to measure success of RPAs, or also how to calculate a return on investment of deploying an RPA?
Yeah, I think it's probably very much what you have a task you did previously, it takes so many hours, and it has X amount of costs, and that and there's opportunity cost as well of time spent doing the manual task versus not having time to do the more value add items. So it's taking what you have there. So maybe it's something that it takes your staff 2 hours every month to do something, and translating that into an effective cost or a saving, and the bot, if you like, might do that equivalent in a couple of minutes. So that's kind of, you're comparing one to the other. I'd probably say as well, it's more of a soft cost, if that's the term, is the actual team and the experience element. Because if someone is doing a job that it's not really engaging them, and they're just tapping away on Excel or whatever for 8 hours, if the bot, first of all, like, there's probably a bit of excitement maybe just with an automation coming in, but also, again, it's just freeing them up to work on the people skills and building relationships and building their business knowledge. So probably something that's not easy to like measure, and I know you're all accountants, so you love the numbers, but it's important to think about that as well.
Perfect. No, amazing. No, thanks for that, Ciarán. Next question is for yourself, Kevin, so that you don't feel left out. They say, I noted you mentioned, you were talking about inherent bias towards the end of your presentation. Is that an issue that's only coming to the fore recently, and it's only coming to people's attention, or has it been something that's been, I guess, there for quite a while? It's just very difficult to eradicate.
Yeah, well, it has always been there even before AI, but it's kind of really coming to the fore lately, where people are getting more. The enthusiasm for AI has kind of gone down a bit, and people are now starting getting a bit worried again, and they're identifying these use cases are coming out now which have bias in them, and people are able to pinpoint them. So things like where this kind of EU regulations are coming into play. But there's so much, like, it's you're never going to be able to completely eradicate it, because a lot of it's based on human bias. So there's so many different types. There's ones where, again, we say like the Amazon thing, they were basing their hiring criteria based on the staff that they have at the moment. So they're not really looking to branch out. That there's a bias there already, that you're going to get the same type of people in all the time. Or you could have so then things like, there's a lot of issues with Facebook targeting ads, and they're targeting ads again based on gender, because they're based on previous data. So the previous data you're going to see is going to be have bias in there. So there's a big job before you even start is taking out that bias. For the smart metering project, we could have, if we used the same type of phone, let's say, to take all the photos of different meters, that's a bias as well. So it's so much in there, and it's such a major part of it. But it'll be impossible to eradicate, but it's something that you kind of just have to explain and do your best to get rid of.
Gotcha. No, perfect. No, thanks for that. One other question, getting conscious of time now, so I might wrap up soon if that's okay, with everyone, conscious of everyone's evening. I suppose one for both of you to an extent is, I suppose, if anyone on the call is, I guess, interested in reading up or learning more about RPA or AI, like, where would you recommend they start? Like, for example, should they just crack open YouTube and check out videos there, or are there particular like articles, books, online courses, anything in particular?
In terms of a course for AI, there's actually a brilliant one that is like an Icelandic. It's called Elements of AI. It's like an Icelandic college did it, and it's very graphical and gives nice high level. And that's a very good one in terms of actually like a course people want to do. But again, yeah, there's a mountain of different kind of books out there. Where you go from like pure analytics, like the likes of Moneyball and stuff as well, got me into analytics.
Yeah.
I think everyone knows. But then to like proper AI, just things like Life 3.0, I think it's called, and some things like that. But yeah, I think there's so much around. You could just crack open YouTube and have a look at anything in there, and there's so much going on.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'd add as well, and not to promote any vendors, I won't name names, but the vendors that operate it, they do offer free training with like kind of trial periods. So and like again, that's all linked to their own YouTube and social media presence, so you can pick up the basics there as well. And there's probably one element where it's if you want to learn the technicals and you want to build a bot, but then also where you want to see the business context and where it can add value as well.
Perfect. Amazing. No, as I keep saying, thanks so much for everything this evening. That was fantastic. I'm conscious of everyone's time and most importantly your time. So it might look to wrap up if that's okay. But firstly, I suppose I can't say anything more without thanking both of yourselves, Ciarán and Kevin, for taking the time to speak to us all this evening. I think everyone learned a lot about RPA and AI technologies and how they can be used. So, and with some very interesting and great examples along the way. I'd also like to thank Rachel and PeopleSource for sponsoring this evening's event. We really do appreciate it. Be sure to follow them on social media. Also, thank you to the Chartered Accountants Ireland for all their ongoing support, and to Emma Billings and Chris in particular for their support. And last but not least, thank you to all of you for tuning in. Be sure to follow the Young Professionals on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn to get news on our upcoming June LGBT Pride event, which will be in partnership with the Institute itself. It's also worth noting that the Young Professionals AGM will be in July. So if you've been attending our events over the past while and like what we do or are interested in getting more involved, feel free to reach out to us via our social media channels to hear more about it. But that's everything for now, everyone. Thanks again, and have a great evening, everyone.